Well, hello and welcome everyone to yet another one of my The Flash videos. Now in this video, I'm going to be discussing a new finale theory as well as a theory that seems to be taken seriously by a few fans, and in my opinion, it is just based on a serious misconception of what Savitar told Barry in explaining how he exists. I'll also be uploading 2 videos before the season finales of both Arrow and The Flash with my final predictions on the deaths on the finales. Now for the benefit of those who argued leaked footage is there to trick people like me, I'll completely ignore any leaked footage when ranking the possible deaths on the finale of The Flash. Now in Arrow's case it's a little bit tricky and different because the expectation is that the season finale will have more than one death. I've heard the numbers 3 and 4, but I never found any solid confirmation on such figures. But to get to the point of this video, remember how in the first season finale a present-day version of Barry went back in time upon his deal with Eobard Thawne and planned on saving his mother, only to be signaled by what we all believed back then was even a more futuristic version of his? I think this might be what is going to happen on the finale of the 3rd season, only it will possibly be more complicated than it sounds. So far, the finale of every single season of the show has taken us back to the same point in time. The murder of Nora Allen at the hand of the Reverse Flash, and I personally think this is where the road might lead up at the end of this very season. But to explain that, I also need to present another theory. I know we all believe the first time we watched a time remnant in the show was when Hunter Zolomon introduced the concept in the 2nd season, followed by when Barry made a deal with a time remnant of his to help him save the multiverse. What if that was not the first time we actually watched a time remnant on the show? What if the Barry Allen that signaled our season 1 Barry not to interfere with the past and stop the death of his mother is but a time remnant from another Flashpoint timeline or another post-Flashpoint timeline similar to ours? Let me explain though why I described it as similar. So if Barry was to stop the murder of his mother by the end of season 1, he was going to end up creating a Flashpoint timeline, not the one we watched early on in the events of season 3, but one that would have started a year earlier, and one reversed would have started with the moment he went back to stop Wells and Eddie ended up killing himself. Now all of these factors considered and combined would have probably caused significant changes back then, and the outcomes could have been totally different, either in a positive or a negative direction. So what I'm trying to say here is I can imagine Barry by the end of the season going across timelines to correct his mistake, to stop his season 2 version from making the mistake of ruining so much, giving Caitlin the powers that made her Killer Frost, killing Dante, bringing Julian Albert and hence alchemy into their lives, among other things. But here comes the trickier and more complicated part. Now I can imagine us watching this season end on a cliffhanger, with Barry either attempting to stop his season 2 self from messing up the timeline or actually succeeding in doing so and erasing both Flashpoint and the current timeline and possibly becoming a time remnant himself. The thing here though is not about how it would happen, because that's pretty straightforward in my opinion, but more about what we should expect from the 4th season of the show. Okay, so there are so many scenarios here, all of which could work. Let's take into consideration though that Barry interacting with himself, even if to stop Flashpoint from happening, is in and out of itself some sort of a change to the timeline, which could create messes of its own. For starters, in all cases it would seem our Barry, the current Barry, would become a time remnant, while the 2nd season Barry would be the one to continue in the original timeline or the season 2 timeline. The show would also have to make a 1-year time jump from the events of the 2nd season as the 4th season starts, given the 4-night crossover would require the events of all 4 Arrowverse shows to be happening at the same point in time. Now there's a chance we could have everything back to the season 2 normal. Caitlin has no powers, Wally has no powers, Dante is alive, HR never came to Earth 1, no Tracy Brand, and Iris and Barry could be still on the verge of starting their relationship. The one thing in this scenario that we should be sure would be the same 1 year after the events of the finale of the 2nd season should be that Jessie Quick would have her powers, considering Flashpoint did not affect any other Earth. That was of course clearly indicated by Earth 2 Harrison Wells early on this season, spotting all the differences in Earth 1 post-Flashpoint. We could end up with the original timeline Barry on the porch of Joe's house sharing that kiss with Iris before he follows her in, instead of running to save his mother. Of course that would be the case if current Barry were to get to him and convince him not to do this act of selfishness, Flashpoint that is, before he even thinks of it. We could also see him coming back from the past after being convinced not to stop Thawne and walking into Joe's house, sharing laughs and all that good stuff. But if that were to be the case, we'll probably get a 1 year later scene where we'll find out things are not as good and dandy as either us or Barry would have expected. So yeah, Dante might still be alive and John Diggle might end up getting baby Sarah back instead of baby John Jr., but we never thought we made too many assumptions. We've put ourselves under the core assumption that Flashpoint ended up giving Wally his powers through Savitar, but what if Wally was meant to get his powers anyway in the original timeline and without the Alchemist Stone, especially after being hit by dark matter on the second season of the show? That could as well sort out a major problem, changing the rate at which Wally has been advancing with his speed and resolving the intro paradox, because if that weren't to be the case, soon the intro will be more like, "My name is Wally West and I'm the fastest man alive, yet this guy in red is the Flash because he kind of coined the name a few seasons ago." Now I know a lot of fans would be worried about Killer Frost and would be angry because such a scenario would mean for her to go back to being just Caitlin. But I believe if they go with such a scenario, Caitlin could still easily have her powers and still be Killer Frost. Think about it for a moment. We made one hell of another assumption here. Actually, we made it, Barry made it, Caitlin made it, every single character on the show pretty much made it. We did assume Flashpoint is what made Caitlin into Killer Frost. However, in both timelines, she was around when the particle accelerator exploded. She did get hit both times, and only after we came back from Flashpoint that she seems to have realized she had powers, 3 years after the explosion. So there is no guarantee that wouldn't have happened in the original timeline anyway. I mean, her powers were dormant all along up until 2016 in the current timeline. What if that holds true as well for the original timeline? What if Caitlin was destined in all cases to get her powers at this very point in time, regardless of how much Barry does or does not change the timeline? If you think about it, it could hold true. It would be amazing, funny, and ironic as well to see the current timeline Barry tell his season 2 self how he changed this and changed that and made Caitlin into Killer Frost, only for us to watch that Barry who never created Flashpoint a year later, finding out most of it still holds true. One significant change we might have on the 4th season though would be all about Barry and Iris. The whole idea to get engaged in the first place came from him trying to change the future to avoid her death at the hands of Savitar. And it is true, that wasn't the case later on, but nonetheless, that is how it all started. So we probably might not see them engaged in such a timeline, and once more I'll say it, their relationship might be put on the back burner again. I think the relationship should be left for future seasons anyway. That doesn't mean I hate Iris, want her to die, or I'm a freaking racist. Yeah, I got that hinted to me. I actually like the actress and her character a lot. I do understand why some or even a lot of people could hate her, because like it or not, our perception of chemistry is a relative thing. But anyway, there's also the chance they might be still going at it in the scenario, not necessarily engaged, but still in a relationship. Now finally, I'm assuming as well that either the death we'll have on the finale or one of a similar intensity is what we would end up seeing on the original timeline on such a 1 year later scene. As a bonus, we might see Patty Spivot again, and I seriously don't care if some of us liked the character and some didn't. The same goes for almost every character on TV. Now I'm not sure if this theory would make sense to everyone watching this, but it's just a variation of another theory I uploaded earlier. The best thing about this theory in my opinion though is that our current timeline Barry could give the season 2 Barry the bullet points about this terrible future, but he would still never know all that happened there. He would never realize how it all went down. Pretty much he would have zero memories of the events of the 3rd season come season 4. Now while we're talking theories, let's talk ones that wouldn't work. There's one theory out there that simply states that Barry could defeat Savitar by allowing Iris to die and never bringing the time remnants in to help him, thus never creating Savitar in the first place, and accordingly ending the loop and bringing Iris back to life. However, Savitar has already been created once, so all that would be nothing but a change to the timeline, and in a similar manner to that of Eobard Thawne, this entire season of Legends of Tomorrow, Savitar would just end up in a similar position, running around alive and kicking, and would end up seeking the same kind of vengeance on Barry. I think though that Barry might enlist the help of his time remnants only now instead of in 2020, and instead of trapping Savitar in the Speed Force, he will trap the last remnant standing, thus changing the entire narrative of Savitar and changing the timeline in a way. There was another theory out there about how to save Iris, and it was all about taking her to a point in the future, post the date of her murder, at the hands of Savitar, and letting her start her life from there. For one, this won't necessarily work because Savitar would know where Barry took her exactly in the future, and would still try to kill her then. Remember, they share memories. But even if it were to work, it would be far away from what a climactic finale needs to be like, a simple resolution, and the show wouldn't do that. But the other theory I spoke of at the beginning of this video is what some fans based on the Savitar reveal. Now this theory states that by Barry's reversal of Flashpoint, he created a timeline where he reversed everything, where his season 2 time remnant never died, where Eobard Thawne lives because guess what? Eddie Thawne is alive and well and never shot himself. I'm sorry, but that is absolute BS. So Savitar tells Barry at the very beginning of last week's episode, you brought a remnant to life last year to defeat Zoom. Your duplicate died, saving the multiverse, and you continued your happy little life. And it would have stayed that way, but then you decided to play God, you created Flashpoint, and changed everything. Now when Barry tells him that if he kills himself he would never come to exist, Savitar responds, cause and effect's a tricky thing, didn't work so well for Eddie. Did it? Shot himself in the chest, Thawne's still kicking around. See, that's the thing about time travel, Barry. The more you do it, the less the rules apply to you. Alright, so the theory kinda negates itself. Eddie Thawne is not alive. We would have loved for that to be the case, but he's not. Savitar said it. Eobard Thawne explained it to Malcolm Merlyn and Damien Dark on the second season of Legends of Tomorrow when he was telling them all about how and why he's been running from the Black Flash. And no, Savitar is not Barry's Time Remnant from the second season. The whole you brought a Time Remnant to life last year is in clear response to Barry referring to him as a Time Remnant. Like, yeah, you know about it because you've already tried it once so far. As for the whole it would have continued that way, it refers more or less to you continued your happy little life and not to the Season 2 Time Remnant. But with that being said, let me know in the comments what you think of my Season 1 Time Remnant theory, what you think of my theory about the current Barry ending up being a Time Remnant after stopping Season 2 Barry from creating Flashpoint, what you think of all the bits and pieces within the rest of my theory, Caitlin, Wally, and the rest included. And of course remember, it would be much appreciated if you drop me a like if you like the content of this video, and if you subscribe if you want to see more The Flash videos on What the Geek. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you soon.